Usually when we talk about history, we're talking about something you look at behind glass, right? It's a dusty old book or some ancient ruin.
It's static. It's something you observe from a distance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty dry, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
But today we are talking about a historical artifact that you can actually eat.
And not just eat, but really experience. It's less of a dessert and more of a sensory archive, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, especially once you smell it. We're diving into a legacy of the Ottoman Empire that, and this is no exaggeration, smells like history in every single bite.
We are talking about baklava.
We are. A dish that has, it's survived entire empires?
It's crossed borders, fueled arguments between nations about who actually invented it.
Oh, for sure.
And somehow it has remained unbelievably delicious through all of it.
But here's the thing. We aren't just going to sit here and, talk about how good it is, though. Let's be honest.
That is definitely going to happen.
It is definitely going to happen. But our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct the perfect baklava. We've got our hands on a really specific, very traditional text. And it's not just a recipe. It reads more like an architectural blueprint.
That's a great way to put it, because when you look at the source material we're working from, it covers everything. It goes from the molecular level of the ingredients all the way to these little nuances that traditional chefs call püfnoktalar. The fine points, the chef's tips. These are the little secrets that separate a soggy, sad pastry from a masterpiece that literally shatters when you bite it.
And I am so ready to get into the magic behind those layers. Because you look at a piece of baklava, and it just seems physically impossible. Yeah. Paper-thin layers, syrup-heavy nuts. How does it not just turn into a pile of mush?
It all comes down to craftsmanship and, as we love to talk about, chemistry.
Of course.
What's so fascinating here is that every single step in this text, from the temperature of the oven to like a specific acid used in the dough, it's all there for a very clear scientific reason. It's a lesson in patience and precision.
Well, let's start where any good construction project starts, the foundation.
The dough.
The dough.
The dough.
I feel like a lot of us, and I'm including myself here, we just go buy the pre-made Phyllo sheets from the freezer aisle.
Which is fine for a quick fix. It's a convenience.
But our source is pretty adamant. If you want the real deal, the high definition version, you have to start from scratch.
That's right. Because frozen Phyllo just lacks the structural integrity you get from the handmade version. The ingredient list for the dough, it starts pretty standard. You've got your base, 3 cups of flour, an egg for structure and fat, a pinch of salt.
Later baking stuff, yeah.
Then we get into the fats and liquids. The source calls for half a tea glass of oil, but it does note you can use butter. And for the liquid, it's a mix. 1 tea glass of yogurt and a half a cup of warm water, plus a teaspoon of baking powder for a little bit of leavening.
So, okay, flour, egg, yogurt, oil. It sounds like a rich, pretty pliable pastry dough. But then I saw this one ingredient in the list, and it made me stop. Because we're making a sweet dessert.
Right.
And right there in the dough recipe, it calls for 1 dessert spoon of vinegar.
Yes. The secret weapon.
That seems so counterintuitive. I mean, usually you see acid to activate baking soda, maybe in a biscuit or something.
Right.
But we're not trying to make this fluff up. So why are we putting salad dressing in our baklava?
This is pure chemistry, and it's brilliant. The source explicitly notes that the vinegar is there for one reason: to provide elasticity.
Elasticity, okay.
Think about what we need this dough to do later on.
You need to roll it incredibly thin.
Not just thin. Transparent. The ideal is that you should be able to read a newspaper through a sheet of raw baklava dough.
Wow.
Now, dough is made of gluten networks, right? Protein.
Yeah.
If that network is too tight, the dough acts like a rubber band. You roll it out.
And it snaps right back, which is so frustrating.
It's the worst. But if the network is too weak, you roll it out and it just tears. The vinegar changes the pH of the dough. That little bit of acidity, it relaxes the gluten network just enough.
So it's not breaking it down. It's just chilling it out.
Exactly. It increases what's called extensibility, the ability to stretch without snapping back while keeping enough strength so it doesn't break. It's a chemical relaxant for the proteins.
That is wild. So without that 1 spoonful of vinegar, you'd be fighting the dough the entire time.
You'd never get those legendary thin layers. It's the difference between, a bready dough and a sheet that's as thin as gossamer.
Okay, so we mix all this up. The source says we need to knead it until it reaches a very specific texture. It uses the phrase soft, but not sticking to the hand.
It's a tactile thing. In Turkey, they often describe the perfect dough consistency as feeling like an earlobe.
That is a very specific, slightly weird, but I get it. I can picture that perfectly. Pliable, but not sticky.
Exactly. And once you hit that sweet spot, you can't just start rolling. The text is very clear about a resting period. You wrap it in cling film and you let it rest for 30 minutes.
See, I'm the kind of person who hates waiting. I'd want to just get going.
Yeah.
Is this just tradition, or is there physics at play here too?
Oh, it's physics. It goes right back to that gluten. Even with the vinegar, the act of kneading has tightened everything up. You've stressed the proteins out.
The dough is tense.
The dough is tense. If you try to roll it now, it'll fight you. That 30 minutes lets the gluten strands relax and align. It makes the dough more flexible, more yielding. It's really the first test of patience in this whole process.
Okay, so the dough has had its nap. It's
Yeah.
relaxed. Now we enter the construction phase.
The architecture.
The source says we divide the dough into 16 equal parts.
Right. And this is where the obsession with thinness really begins. The source material gets intense here.
It does. It stops feeling like a suggestion and starts feeling like a command. It says the thinner the sheet, the crispier the result.
That's the golden rule. You have to roll each of those 16 little balls of dough out on a floured surface with a special rolling pin and oklava until it's as thin as humanly possible.
And that's a real skill, right? It's not just pressing down.
No, it's a rhythmic motion, almost like a dance, to expand the surface area without creating any holes or tears. But the text does give a warning.
About going too far.
Exactly. It notes that while you want thinness, you have to be realistic. If you go too thin, the dough just dries out before you can even assemble it. And if you try to do, say, 50 layers instead of 16 without the right butter ratio, you just get a dense, doughy brick. For a home oven, 15 to 20 layers is the sweet spot to make sure the heat can actually penetrate all the way through.
Okay, so we've got our 16 thin sheets. Now we need the mortar to hold this all together.
And that mortar is butter, a lot of butter.
How much are we talking?
The source calls for 100 grams of melted butter just for the layering. And it's very explicit that the quality of the butter really matters here.
Why melted, though? I'm thinking of something like a croissant, where you use cold butter to create steam and lift.
Great question. This is a totally different goal. In a croissant, you want lift. You want it to puff up and be airy.
Right.
In baklava, we're looking for separation and crispness. We don't want it to puff. We want distinct, shattered layers. By using melted butter, you're essentially frying each individual sheet of dough in the oven.
So the butter acts as a barrier, stopping the sheets from fusing together.
Precisely. It's a type of lamination, but for a completely different texture profile.
So walk me through the assembly. It's not just a pile of dough.
No, it's very methodical. You place one sheet on the tray. You brush it generously with that melted butter. You place another sheet, brush with butter. You do this for about 8 to 10 layers.
That creates the bottom foundation.
Right. It needs to be sturdy. It's going to hold the weight of the nuts and eventually all that syrup.
And then comes the filling.
The filling. The source calls for 300 grams of walnuts or hazelnuts, chopped up finely.
I know the pistachio versus walnut debate can get pretty heated.
It can. Pistachio is very common in Gaziantep, a city famous for its baklava. Walnuts are a bit more common in home cooking and in other regions. The source here uses walnuts or hazelnuts, and it mentions an option to add a teaspoon of cinnamon.
Ooh, that cinnamon note feels like a little bridge to, like, Balkan or Greek styles, doesn't it?
It does. It adds this aromatic depth that works really well. So you spread that nut mixture evenly over the bottom layers.
And then just repeat the process for the top half.
Exactly. You take the rest of your dough, roll out the sheets, and layer them on top of the nuts, buttering between each and every one. You're sealing that filling inside.
So now we have this tray. It looks like a solid block of raw dough and butter. And this is where the source mentions a step that I think a lot of people might get wrong, especially if they're used to making, like, an apple pie.
Oh, this is a fatal error if you miss it.
You don't bake it and then slice it.
Absolutely not. You must cut the baklava into its shaped squares, or those beautiful diamonds, before it goes anywhere near the oven.
Why is that so crucial?
2 big reasons. First, a physical one. Once that pastry is baked, it is incredibly fragile. It's like glass made of flour. If you try to force a knife through it after baking,
You'd shatter it. It would just be a mess.
confetti. You'd completely ruin the architecture. But the second reason is chemical or maybe structural. By cutting it beforehand, you're creating channels.
Channels for what? The heat?
For the heat to penetrate, yes. But more importantly, for the syrup later on, when we pour that liquid gold over the top, it needs a direct path to the bottom of the tray instantly. If you don't cut it first, the syrup just pools on top.
And the bottom stays dry.
Oh,
Oh, that would be a disaster.
total disaster. So the cut is actually an engineering decision.
I love that. And there's one last thing before the oven, right?
Yes, the final touch, you pour even more melted butter over the top of the cut, raw pastry. This is what guarantees that signature golden color and that intense crispiness. You're basically confitting the top layer.
Okay, the architecture is complete. Time for thermodynamics.
Into a preheated oven at 180 degrees Celsius. That's about 350 Fahrenheit.
And the timing is 45 to 50 minutes.
45 to 50 minutes.
That feels like a really long time for dough that's paper thin. I'd be terrified of burning it.
And that's the point. It is a long time, and it's on purpose. The source gives a very strict warning about temperature here. If your oven is too hot, say 200 C.
The top will brown in 10 minutes.
Exactly. You'll pull it out thinking it's done, but the inside layers will still be raw and doughy and wet.
So you're not just baking it, you're drying it out.
You are. You want a slow, gradual, golden roast. You are slowly driving the water out of those inner layers so that the butter can properly fry them. The goal is to have the whole thing be dehydrated and crispy before the sugar ever touches it.
So while that's slowly roasting, and the kitchen smells incredible.
Unbelievable. Toasted nuts and butter.
We have to make the other half of the equation, the syrup, the sherbet.
This part is simple, but again, consistency is key. It's 3 cups of sugar, 3 cups of water, and the juice of half a lemon.
I want to pause on the lemon. I always thought that was just for flavor, to cut the intense sweetness.
It does that, but it has a much more important structural purpose.
I figured. In candy making, acid usually does something scientific.
You're spot on. It's all about preventing crystallization. We're dissolving a huge amount of sugar in water, right? It's a supersaturated solution. As it cools, those sugar molecules want to rebond and turn back into solid crystals.
Which would make the baklava gritty and sandy.
Awful. The worst texture. The acid in the lemon juice breaks down some of the sucrose into glucose and fructose. We call that invert sugar. And these different molecules get in the way of the crystallization process. They keep the syrup smooth and fluid.
So the lemon is basically an insurance policy for the texture.
100%. So you boil this mix, then lower the heat and let it simmer for 10 to 15 minutes. You want it to be dense but still fluid.
And the source mentions an optional but very traditional Ottoman touch.
Yes. Adding a teaspoon of rose water after you take it off the heat, it gives it that classic floral profile that really marks it as an Ottoman-style dessert.
Okay. So we've got our tray of golden crispy pastry out of the oven. We've got our syrup, which has been cooling down. And now we have reached what the source text basically treats as the most critical moment in the entire universe.
This is the grand unifying theory of baklava. If you get this single step wrong, everything we just discussed, the vinegar, the thin rolling, all of it is completely wasted.
The meeting of the two elements.
The rule is absolute and there are no exceptions. The baklava must be hot tea, fresh from the oven. The syrup must be cold.
Really cold, not even lukewarm.
Cold. You make it ahead of time and let it cool completely.
I feel like I've seen people do it differently, hot on hot or cold on cold.
And that's where they go wrong. If you pour hot syrup on hot pastry, you steam the dough, it turns into bread pudding. Total mush.
And cold on cold.
The pastry is too tight, the structure has contracted, it won't absorb the syrup properly, it just kind of sits on top in a sticky layer.
Okay, so walk me through the physics of hot baklava meeting cold syrup. Why does that specific combo work so perfectly?
Okay, so picture the baklava fresh out of the oven. It is scorching hot. The air pockets between the layers are fully expanded. All the moisture has evaporated. It's basically dry and incredibly thirsty.
Right.
When you pour that cold syrup over it, you create a violent temperature shock.
That sounds dramatic.
It is, and you can hear it. That shock does 2 things. First, it halts the cooking process instantly. But second, and this is the really cool part, the rapid cooling creates a vacuum effect.
A vacuum.
As the hot air inside the pastry contracts from the cold, it physically sucks the heavy syrup deep into the layers instantly.
So it's not just soaking it up like a sponge, it's inhaling the syrup.
It's inhaling it. That's what creates that famous sound.
The sizzle.
That aggressive sure sound as the liquid hit the hot pan. That sound is the sound of success. It means the pastry is drinking the liquid while the structure itself is setting into that final crisp texture.
So you pour it over, you hear the sizzle, the kitchen fills with this incredible smell, and now comes the hardest part. the part I know I would fail. The final test.
The ultimate test of
The
patience.
source says, once the syrup is poured, you walk away. You cannot eat it.
Not yet. The text advises letting it rest for a minimum of 3 hours, but it says preferably overnight.
Overnight? That just feels cruel. I mean, it's right there. It's done. Why can't I just dig in?
Because right after you pour the syrup, the equilibrium isn't there yet. It's just wet pastry. The syrup hasn't had time to fully penetrate the nuts, the bottom layers. It needs time for diffusion. The sugar needs to settle and balance out.
So it's like letting a good steak rest after you cook it, but for sugar.
That's a great analogy. If you cut into it too soon, all the syrup just runs out onto the plate, and the baklava itself will taste weirdly dry inside. If you wait, the syrup becomes one with the texture. It goes from being pastry with a sauce to just baklava.
So you have to stare at this golden, glistening, perfect tray for hours before you can touch it.
It's the final ingredient, time.
And then finally, it's served, cooled, absorbed, ready.
A masterpiece of edible history.
So let's just recap this journey, because it was honestly way more complex than I thought. We started with a pinch of vinegar.
To modify the pH and tell the gluten to relax.
So we could stretch it paper thin. Then we built a 16-story building out of that dough, using melted butter specifically to create separation.
To fry every single floor of the building.
We baked it low and slow to dehydrate it, not just cook it.
And then we engineered a thermal shock with cold syrup and hot pastry. We used a vacuum effect to lock in all that flavor without destroying the crunch.
It really is so much more than just sugar and nuts. It's this incredible balance of texture and timing and chemistry.
It's precision. That's what I love about this source. It shows that traditional cooking isn't just, grandma's magic. It's applied science discovered through centuries of trial and error.
Which brings us to our final thought. The source mentions that while this whole process requires a lot of time and a lot of care, probably a full 24 hours from start to finish, the result is worth everything.
And that raises a really interesting question for us today.
Exactly. We live in this world of instant gratification. I can go buy a candy bar and get a sugar rush in 2 seconds. I can order baklava on a delivery app.
So, does something that took 24 hours of your own effort to prepare actually taste objectively better because of that effort?
Is it just the psychology of, I made this, therefore it's amazing? Or is there something tangible in that slow food approach, the resting, the cooling, the manual rolling, that a machine on a factory line just can't replicate?
I think it has to be a little of both. There is a flavor that comes from craftsmanship, from the care you put in, but also chemically, industrial versions often cut corners. They use cheaper fats than butter. They don't rest the dough as long, so that patience really does manifest as a better flavor and texture.
I think you're right. It's the difference between just eating a calorie and eating an experience.
Well said.
Well, whether you're brave enough to attempt this architectural feat in your own kitchen, or you're just going to appreciate the next piece you eat with a newfound respect for physics, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
Keep exploring the layers.